Hello, and welcome back to my character guide. We're going to cover the last 3 characters in the roster, well, that you don't have to unlock in any special way, and we're going to change the format a little bit. I hope you enjoy it. Last time I talked about the basic character moves, and this time I want to give a bit of time to the enemies of the game. In Streets of Rage Remake, their behavior has been changed a fair amount. The most striking thing is that enemies tend to understand their spacing very well. They know the reach of their jabs, and they have a guess at the reach of your attacks as well. So they try to hover outside of your range, wait for you to miss with something, and then hit you. Or just move up behind you and try to take you by surprise. And this extends to when they're wielding weapons. Especially Streets of Rage 1 enemies will try and stay within the reach of their weapons but outside of yours. You can sometimes take them by surprise with a fast move, but overall this makes them fairly difficult to tangle with, especially in the higher difficulties. Enemies are also aware of things that are not immediately visible. For example, if you execute an invulnerable move, they will understand that it's invulnerable and not charge into it. Enemies with higher health that are injured will search for and eat food on higher difficulties. This means that if you find food and want to preserve it on the screen through the next couple of fights, it can easily backfire on you. Finally, on the higher difficulties such as Very Hard and Mania, enemy movement speed greatly increases past what you see in the original games. If such an enemy wants to evade you, you're not going to catch it. You have to trap it against a wall or some such tactic like that. Because of this, it seems commonplace to go into the options and select the most favorable game mechanics for yourself before going into the higher difficulties. I wholeheartedly endorse this practice. Zan is a character that confused me for a while, which is not too surprising, considering that he was specifically designed to work in a strange kind of way. This is even clear through his animations. He's mostly robots, so it's only natural that he would move differently than a human being. However, through some practice I think I've mostly figured out his game plan. If I had to stat out Zan like he was a role-playing game character, I'd give him fairly low power but good mobility and excellent accuracy. When Zan is used well, enemies have even more difficulty handling Zan's moves than the player had when learning to use them properly. I hope to express this through greater detail when I go through the moves specifically. The first thing to understand is that, much like Adam, Zan has amazing reach on just about everything that he does. Unlike Adam, Zan is not really built to inflict combos in the traditional sense. Even his basic attack string is just 2 punches followed by a quick knockdown. All of his dash attacks work in this way as well. He moves forward quickly, uses an attack, and knocks the enemies down. But it's worth mentioning, in fact I think it's central to his character, that it does this simple thing amazingly well. His 3-star dash in particular has amazing reach, excellent mobility, can be moved up or down on the y-axis as it progresses, and it has a special quality of giving even enemies that block a very hard time. The reason for this is that most dash attacks deal a sort of combo of damage and then knock down as the last part. Enemies that block can block some or all of it and then punish you for it at the end. However, since Zan knocks down with 1 punch and his damage-inflicting box stays out for a long time, what usually happens, in fact what almost always happens, is that the enemy blocks 1 portion of it, or 2, and then finally gets knocked down for failing to block the entire thing. I'd like to add that the 2 and 3-star attacks were completely remade for, well, Streets of Rage Remake. The original Streets of Rage 3 versions were considerably less useful. When it comes to jump attacks, you might have some difficulty. His standard knockdown jump attack goes against his general theme by having truly awful reach. It's a strange shoulder strike that doesn't seem to have much utility compared to his other moves. His jumping stun attack is a different story though. Its behavior is a bit strange, but it has a very useful property. It will hit tall enemies multiple times. The damage isn't amazing, but it does mean that it will always keep the enemy in hit stun when you land, which solves a problem that every other character has. It's easy for other characters to hit a tall enemy too early with their jump stun, meaning that the enemy will recover before you land. Zan does not have this problem and can rely on his jump stun attack against pretty much any enemy. When Zan gets his robotic hands on an opponent, he has some interesting options. While his holding strikes aren't anything special, his backwards throw deals more damage than most other characters. He also has the rare ability to choose which way to throw an opponent even from the back. His power throw from the back has a particularly useful property. It puts the enemy down right in front of him with its back turned. This sets the enemy up for Zan to do anything when they get up, including another back throw. Enemies that get up quickly are especially vulnerable to chained back throws and just get wrecked. Back in the original Streets of Rage 3, I know that's kind of a weird statement, Zan didn't use weapons the same way as other characters. He turned all of them into energy and could throw it at enemies. In the remake, that's gone. Zan can actually use weapons, and he's pretty good with them. His animation is quick, he has good reach, as usual, and he has some nice dashing attacks with most weapons. Plus he's the only character who can cut an enemy with half with a knife. That's pretty brutal. Last, we'll take a look at Zan's special attacks. His defense special has pretty bad range, but it has an interesting property. It doesn't knock down until the last hit. So, if you do hit with this special, you'll have plenty of breathing space when the animation is done. I tend to use his offensive special more because it's versatile. It has great reach, of course, doesn't take long to execute, and is invulnerable from start to finish. The damage isn't amazing, he's still a Streets of Rage 3 character, but I think the other useful properties make up for it. And his dashing special is a throwback to the energy ball throw in Streets 3, but I don't use it much. It doesn't do much damage and the explosion can hit you pretty easily. I think that's it for Zan. I had more fun playing him than I thought I would once I figured out how he works. Give him a try sometime. Unlike the other characters, I'm going to start with the Streets of Rage 2 version of Skate. Hopefully the reasons will become clear as I go along. Streets of Rage 2 Skate is the character I have the most fun playing right now. He's a freaking bullet. He moves around really fast and a lot of his attacks just fling him across the screen. The main downside is that he can easily get himself into trouble if you're not careful. He can really leave himself open at times. One of my favorite YouTube players says that Skate likes to be hit, and it's pretty easy to see why he said that. Let's go over the details. Skate's movement speed is ridiculous, easily the best in the game. His dash especially gives him an edge. He needs that speed because getting into the right attack range can be tricky. His jab range is pretty awful, though it does come out very fast. This jab is mostly there to set up a grapple or dash attack. His default punch combo deals low damage and is generally awful. His jump attacks are also kind of loud, though his neutral jump kick has a good hitbox. The default dash attack is a perfect example of what Skate is about. The headbutt animation deals a big chunk of damage in a single hit, which is useful for a lot of situations. He also knocks enemies down in the follow-up animation and is pretty safe until the move ends. However, the long distance of the move can also push you forward through the stage and spawn more enemies than you wanted to deal with. Or you could land in a place where you just trapped. It takes some planning to use correctly. The 1-star version takes both the strengths and weaknesses of the move to new heights. The headbutt animation is extended and much easier to hit with, but you just uncontrollably fly a huge distance. Use it with care. At 2 stars, his dash attack doesn't really add much to his game. It's a short combo that deals less damage than his headbutt and is kind of unsafe. 3 stars is a different story though. It's a nice mid-range move that hits behind him as well, which is a tool they really needed back in the other versions of the game. Definitely try to get used to that special motion if you want to play as him a lot. A little kid like Skate doesn't seem like he'd be a good grappler, but he's actually one of the best. Instead of a backwards throw, he has a painful double kick. His back throw looks like he could easily get hit out of it, but I've never seen that happen. He may just be invulnerable during the whole thing. In addition to high damage, you can easily catch more than one enemy in it. Just bear in mind that the attack ends early if the grappled enemy is KO'd. The only real downside to Skate's grapple game is that he can't instantly fling enemies around. You have to do a vault throw to pull that off. Skate is the only character who can do that, don't forget about it. Corkscrew Hit! I want to like Skate's offensive special. It's tricky for spacing, but it feels very satisfying to land. The problem is that Skate needs his clear out special for when he gets himself into trouble, which happens often. His wind-up time and inability to combo this move makes it just way too unreliable in most situations. Setting hit pause to Streets of Rage 3 mode helps speed it up a lot, but it's still more of a show-off move than a vital part of his toolkit. Overall, Skate definitely has a different feel from the other characters. His fast but risky style is definitely a personal favorite of mine. Now let's leave that version behind and go to his Streets of Rage 3 version. I worked pretty hard to make Streets of Rage 3 Skate work. He just suffers a huge amount from the attack nerf that Streets 3 gave to everyone. It's true that like the other characters, Skate got some safer moves. His 2-star and 3-star attack rolls go under a lot of enemy moves. His offensive special can really get him out of trouble and isn't nearly as finicky to use as his Corkscrew Kick. But you need to avoid bad situations twice as long because he deals that much less damage. It's a lot easier for him to take some chip damage a bit at a time and die before he can reach the next bit of food, or even slip up and get killed off immediately. I just personally don't enjoy playing as that version of Skate. Well, let's move on. I thought that Zan would be the most difficult character to use well, but that was because I didn't know anything about Max. Someone new to the game might look at Max's moves and think, yeah, this guy seems pretty easy to figure out. He's the big guy, moves slow, and hits really hard. All of these things are true, but as usual, the details cause a whole mess of problems. Back in Streets of Rage 2, the title of Most Overpowered was a pretty close race between Max and Axel. Axel was a little bit ahead, but just because his invulnerable grand upper frames made it really difficult for him to die if used right. Max was pretty close for reasons I'll explain as we go. Thanks to the new tools in Remake and the removal of Maxel's iframes, I think Max is pulled pretty far ahead. I'll do my best to explain what Max can do, but I'm pretty sure there are lots of tricks I haven't discovered yet. I'm going to start out with Max's weaknesses because they're important to remember for every other part of his gameplay. As mentioned before, he's slow, he walks slow, he dashes slow, he jumps slow, and worst of all, he hits slow. Max's jab is the slowest of them all, and the range on it is also pretty bad. Your timing needs to be on point to land that thing when a thug is trying to hit you. Enemies in Remake love to surround you, and Max has a lot of trouble coping with that. Max wants to be overlapping his opponent for his best moves to work properly. Naturally, enemies will knock you down long before you get that close if you don't know what you're doing. Max's most important basic tool is his slide, which is his normal dash attack. It moves pretty fast, knocks down nearby enemies, and puts distant enemies in hit stun. All three of these are very important for him. The first two are fairly obvious. He desperately needs mobility and an escape tool. The third, though, that can take a long time to master. You need to first understand spacing. If you stun an enemy near the start of that section of the slide, they'll recover and hit you before your slide is finished. An enemy that's moving around can easily ruin your spacing or just avoid the slide. You can use it to set up an enemy that's just standing up if you have the spacing and timing right, though for that you also need to know the get-up time for each kind of enemy extremely well. If you succeed though, you can get a perfectly placed punch combo, grapple, or even a back throw. I find that doing the 1-star version of the slide is especially helpful for getting the back throw. So how good are those things if you can land them? Let's find out by trying them out on a very unfortunate Axel training dummy. First, for comparison, this is Adam's Suplex. It's a fairly strong grapple finisher. This is Max's basic punch combo. This is Max's jumping back throw. This is what Max can do with a front throw if nothing interrupts him. It's fair to say that enemies do not survive contact with Max for very long. Let's talk about those grapples a little bit. Unlike the other characters, Max cannot vault to the other side of an enemy because, well, look at him. Instead, he jumps up while carrying the enemy with him. Since enemies are pretty much always facing you in this game, getting the quick damage from back throws takes some extra effort. The easiest way is to grab them while they're getting up, and there are a lot of tricks for this. Some of your throws, like the front suplex, will let you just walk up and grab them, but if your opponent gets up slowly, you'll probably be attacked first. Sometimes a quick knockdown move will clear out the space in front of you in time for you to land the grab. Landing a back throw on a standing enemy takes some practice. Maybe a lot of practice. You have the slide, as I mentioned before. Mastering that will get big rewards. There's also the jumping stun attack. That one is also tricky because of difficult timing. Attack too early and the opponent will recover from the stun before you land. But if you attack really late, you're likely to get punched out of the air. I think it's also worth mentioning that you don't have to land a back throw every time you slide or jump. A close punch combo deals plenty of damage. And finally, some enemies have attack patterns that let you back grab them when they move past you. With all that talking about that one throw, I might have made it sound like the back grab is the absolute center of Max's gameplay. It's not, of course. It's just one of the trickiest things to use well. Let's talk about some of his other tools, like weapons. Max is not that good with knives, but anything larger is very useful for him. This is because his weapon swing hits behind him, and that part of his attack comes out instantly. Not only is it a good solution to being surrounded, but there are times when you want to turn your back to an enemy and use that part of the attack just because it hits on the first frame. Max also has a dashing attack with pipes. The range and damage are pretty good, but that's not the scariest part. If you're close enough, you can hit with the wind-up animation and deal damage twice, like this. Both special attacks are useful. The normal standing one is especially important in the situations that tend to give him the most trouble. Max easily gets surrounded by smaller enemies and can take a lot of chip damage from them. Ideally, you want to avoid this with a slide move, but things don't always work out that way. As for the offensive shoulder ram, it's a pretty versatile move. If you're in trouble and the enemies are all on one side of you, there you go. It's also a nice speed boost that knocks down in every part of its animation. And it can be used for some extra damage at the end of a punch combo or choke. Just be sure that you're going to be safe as it recharges. Are we at the end of the tool list? I think we are, or almost anyway. Star Dashes. Max's 2-star dash is an amazing move for him. It would be an amazing move for any character, really. He moves quickly, is mostly invulnerable, grabs enemies so blocking is useless, and knocks down any enemy he touches. The only drawback is a bit of vulnerable time if you completely miss. In a narrow area, this dive crush can be kind of abused. It can be seriously abused. Fine, it breaks the game. I think that's finally it. Was that too much detail? I dunno. I really wanted to express how much depth was in Max's gameplay. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something interesting in this video. Later.